Hi guys, Dr. J here, and in this video I want to take a few minutes and walk you guys through doing loops and conditional statements in Python with the idea of being able to do more complex function. Now, if you're currently in the class, you can check out more details on the web pages that I've posted in Canvas on how to do this, so take a look at that. Okay, so here we are in Google Colab, and what I want to do is kind of illustrate for you guys how we can use indices and loops to go through a set of numbers in a list in Python. So let's say that I have a list. There's my variable called a list. Now the way this works in Python uses a zero-based indexing. That means it starts counting from 0. So if I were to make a new list, which is the index of each number in this list, so here we are, 0 to 5. The number 1 is the 0th number. It has the 0th index. The first index is the 0 index. So this is the index for the number 1 in a list. And then we have the 1 index goes to the number 3, the 2 index goes to the number 4, so on and so forth. So one way that this is useful is when we're iterating over lists or over iterables in Python. So a list in Python is called an iterable, and that just means you can step through it one element at a time. A simple way to do this is using a for loop for element in a list. There we go. So I've just written a for loop in Python. You see the keyword for there, for element in a list. So this is the uniquely Python way of iteration in a for loop. Element can be any name. You don't have to call this element. It could be for x. In a list, print x. That works just as well. It could be for a big elephant in a list. So the idea here is that this variable is just kind of named on the fly, and it's going to iterate. You see here, we're iterating through each number in a list. So we just go through, we take each element out. I'm going to go back to element here. So for each element in the list, we're going to take that element and print it. And this is a basic for loop in Python. Now, there's a very helpful function called enumerate in Python. And this function enumerate allows us to both get the index and the value for each element in that list. So the way I'm going to do this is I'll say for index element in enumerate a list, you see that there, I'm going to print the index and then I'm going to print the element. All right, so I've reformatted my print statement so that it tells me what index and what element is in each index element pair in the list a list. So this enumerate is what's going to give us the index, and then we're going to also get the element, each element from a list. And you see I'm using this kind of comma notation here to separate them. And then I'm going to print that. This string right here is just a string where each one of these brackets will put in the index and the element. So if I run this now, you see index goes from 0 up to 5, and the elements go through each element in the list. So you see index 0 goes with element 1, index 1 goes with element 3. This is indexing in Python. So each element in the list in Python is assigned and indexed from 0 to the length of the list. Len of a list, that's 6 elements. We have 6 elements in the list, and the index is just going from 0 to this length minus 1, right? Because it's zero-based indexing. Okay, so this is very basic iteration, doing a for loop to iterate over a list in Python. Now there's a little bit more complicated versions of this, or we can start adding things basically. So one of the things we could do is to add a conditional statement. So you can see here that I've changed this for loop now so that now as we iterate through each index and element in the list, then if the index modulo 2, so this % operator is the modulo operator. So it's like if you divide by 2, what's the remainder? Divide 4 by 2, the remainder is 0. So that's an even number. So this is basically saying if the index is an even number, then print, otherwise don't do anything. And again, you can see this typical Python structure here where we have our keyword if, and then we have our condition, and then, well, this is our whole thing is our condition here, and then we end with the colon. And that tells us that what's going to follow is what's going to be executed if this condition is true. If the condition is false, there's no else statement here, so we don't do anything. And also notice that each time I use one of these Python keywords, I've indented. I have to indent that line so that Python knows this line here goes with this conditional statement. So if I run that, you see we only get the indices which are even. But if I go back and put that print statement back in, now in addition to my even print statements here, I'm also getting every single one of the actual indices themselves. And that's because of this additional print statement here. You see I'm getting my print statement and then 0, and then 1 with no print statement because that was not even. So if I were to tab this in now so that both of these lines are tabbed to the same position, and I run that, now I only get that printed index if I'm inside that conditional, or if that conditional statement is true. So this indenting is very important because it tells Python when those lines get executed. Okay, we've added a conditional statement to our for loop, but we could also add another for loop. So for example, we could do a double loop through a list. And now here I need to be careful because I just named my variables the same thing, index and index, element and element. So let me call these guys index 2 and element 2. Now notice for a second we're iterating through the same list in this second line, but we're doing it again. So for each index and element in the line, or sorry, in a list, we're going to iterate through the whole list again. Now you see we get a lot more lines because we're iterating through the whole list twice, and actually it will iterate through 5 times for the first iteration, and then for each one of those 5 numbers in our first iteration, we're iterating through all 5 of the numbers again. So it's 5 times 5, or 25. And so here you see our index 1 is 0, and our index 2 is 0. Index 1 is 0 still, and index 2 is 1. And so for the first set, for the first index in the first for loop, we're iterating through all the numbers in the second for loop. Okay, makes sense? So we're iterating through the list twice, and this is kind of like a matrix now, where you could think about this as the rows of a matrix, and the second index is the columns of a matrix, or something like that. And so this is what we need to do for writing a function, for example, if we wanted to calculate pairwise differences between values in the list. So we have our list here, a list, and what if we wanted to calculate pairwise differences between each one of the pairs? So we would need to iterate through the whole list once, right? And then for each element in that list, we would want to get the second element, or sorry, get all the other possible elements and calculate the difference between all those other elements and the first element. So one way to do this would be print element 2 minus element. So we could do that. And so now here is just printing out all the numbers which are the pairwise differences between each value and every other value. So you see we start at 0 because difference between a value and itself is 0. 1 minus 1, that's going to be 0. 1 minus 3, that's going to be 2, so that's our second element. And again, we're iterating through the list the first time as like the first number in our subtraction problem. And then as we iterate through the list the second time, we then subtract that element. Yeah, I guess I've got it backwards here. We'll subtract the second element from the first element. And by the way, those will be the same numbers, they'll just be negative of whatever they were, right? So exactly the same difference, just positive or negative, depending on the order of subtraction. One thing to notice is that because this is entirely symmetric, element, if you take the index 2, this is index 2, third element, and subtract index 0, first element, that's the exact same thing as taking element 0 and subtracting element 2, right? Just the sign is flipped, so the negative sign. So you'll see here is a negative 2, and there should be a positive 2, which is right here. So as I was saying, we can iterate through our lists twice like this, and we can calculate all the pairwise differences. But we do need to be careful because some of these differences are repeated. So for example, you see here 14, and you see here minus 14. So that would be differencing 15 from 1. So we don't want to difference 15 from 1, and then difference 1 from 15, that's the same difference, that's the same thing. So we need to kind of modify our for loop with some kind of conditional statement in order to exclude double counting some of these differences. We just want 1 with 3, 1 with 4, 1 with 7, 1 with 10, 1 with 15, and then we want only 3 with 4, 3 with 7, 3 with 10, and 3 with 15, right? So you guys catch my meaning. I don't want 1 with 15 and 15 with 1. That's the same pair of numbers. So what we can do here is we can just simply add a conditional. And we can add the conditional based on the indices. I actually just said what we should do. So we want 1 difference with 3, 4, 7, 10, and 15. And then we only want 3 difference with 4, 3 difference with 7, 3 difference with 10, 3 with 15. We don't want 3 and 1 again. And so what we can do is we can say if index 2 is greater than index 1. So again, we're thinking about indices here. So 1 is the 0th element, 3 is the 1st element, 4 is the 2th element. I'm saying that a little weirdly, but it's a little bit confusing the way Python numbers these things. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is the indices. And so if we've already gone through and gotten all the differences with the 0th index number, 1, we're going to skip that lower 1 and just go directly to skip that and then just go directly to the index which is just greater than the one that we've already done. So if index 2 is greater than, and I'll say greater than or equal to index 1, that way we won't miss the first number, then we'll print the difference, otherwise we're not going to. So if you're thinking about this in terms of a matrix of numbers where this is the columns and the list is also the rows and each element in the matrix is the pairwise difference, then along the diagonal that will all be zeros, and that's fine. The way that I've written this, we're going to keep the diagonal, but then we're only going to keep differences which are on one side or another of the diagonal. In this case, it'll be the upper diagonal. But if you're not thinking about matrices, just think about it as we've already gotten the difference of 1 with 3. We're not going to go back and take 3 with 1. We're going to start at 3 and just take differences up from there. Okay? So now if I run this, and again you'll see this minus 14 is repeated. Here's 14. So 14 and minus 14 is repeated. And now we have much fewer numbers because we're skipping the whole lower half of this matrix, or all the numbers which are to the left of the one that we're using as index 1. And now you see we don't have any repetitions because we don't have any repeated numbers, so all the numbers are different. Okay. You'll also notice that we lost, so these ones are mostly negative. The ones that we had before were mostly positive. So we lost the positive ones. We just kept the negative ones, basically, negative differences. Because we're differencing, in this case, all of the higher numbers are getting larger, and so that's why these are all negative, just the way that we've done this. So we've basically been able to use this conditional statement with this double for loop to calculate pairwise differences without repeating any difference. And so this is what, for those of you in the class, this is what you'll need to do in the homework, but just in general, by kind of putting these conditional and for loops together, we can do a lot more complex things, use more complex logic than just a simple for loop. All right, so hopefully that's helpful. If you have questions on this, post a question in the chat and I'll be happy to try to answer that.